Have you ever wondered what would happen if the founder of a massive financial empire walked into their own company and no one recognized them? What if they were treated like a stranger, doubted, or even humiliated right in the home they built? Today, we'll dive into the inspiring true story of Evelyn Thompson, the hidden billionaire behind one of America's leading banking institutions, Apex Trust. One late afternoon, Evelyn stepped into the smallest branch of her bank in Chicago, not in a powerful suit or with an entourage, but in a simple sweater and worn-out sneakers. She just wanted to perform a basic transaction, withdraw $3,000 from her personal account. But what she received wasn't respect. It was suspicious glances, insulting questions, and a bitter truth about the very company she had dedicated her life to building. How will Evelyn confront this injustice? Stick around to find out. Evelyn Thompson, 58 years old, is a legend in the American financial industry, though her face remains unknown to most. As the founder and CEO of Apex Trust, one of the largest banks in the U.S., Evelyn built her empire from scratch, starting with a tiny office in Chicago in the 1980s. As a black woman, she overcame countless barriers related to gender and race to make Apex Trust a symbol of fairness and financial accessibility for all. Evelyn always believed her bank was more than a place to store money. It was a place to build trust and respect. However, after years of managing from afar, Evelyn began receiving troubling reports about customer service at some smaller branches. There were complaints about employees discriminating against customers based on appearance, skin color, or attire, unwilling to rely solely on written reports. Evelyn decided to investigate herself. She chose the branch in West Chicago, a location she had personally inaugurated 15 years earlier. This small branch served a working-class community, and Evelyn hoped to see the service ethos she had always emphasized in her business philosophy. That late afternoon, the Chicago sky was painted orange-red as the sun dipped low. Evelyn stepped into the branch lobby, her sneakers softly tapping on the polished marble floor. She wore a gray sweater, her hair tied neatly back with no hint of her being a billionaire or CEO. She simply wanted to be treated like an ordinary customer. In her small purse, she carried her ID and personal account number, something she rarely used but kept as a reminder of her humble beginnings. The transaction counter was quiet, with only a young teller named Mia Carter sitting behind it, typing on her computer with an indifferent expression. Evelyn approached, offered a slight smile, and said, "Hello, I'd like to withdraw $3,000 from my personal account." Mia didn't even look up. She simply slid a form across the counter and said, "Fill this out." No greeting, no eye contact. Evelyn didn't mind. She quickly filled out the form and slid it back. But when Mia glanced at the form and Evelyn's ID, her demeanor shifted. A suspicious look crossed her face as she scanned Evelyn from her worn sweater to her scuffed sneakers. "Please wait a moment," Mia said coldly, then took Evelyn's ID and disappeared behind a frosted glass door leading to the back office. Evelyn stood there, a sense of unease creeping in. She was no stranger to prejudiced glances. She had faced them thousands of times in her life. But here at her own bank, this felt like a betrayal. After a few agonizing minutes, Mia returned, but not alone. With her was Michael Reed, the branch manager, a middle-aged man with a forced smile and sharp, calculating eyes that seemed to size Evelyn up in an instant. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson," Michael said, his tone polite but dripping with an undercurrent of suspicion. "I understand you want to withdraw $3,000. May I see your ID again?" Evelyn sensed the shift in the atmosphere, a subtle but unmistakable tension that made her stomach tighten. She handed over her ID once more, but Michael held it up to the light, inspecting it as if searching for signs of forgery. His fingers traced the edges of the card with exaggerated care, his brow furrowing as if he expected to uncover some hidden flaw. "What do you do for a living, Mrs. Thompson?" Michael asked, his tone resembling an interrogation rather than a routine inquiry. Evelyn paused briefly, a wave of anger rising within her. She had faced questions like this before, but never in a place she considered her own. "I work in finance," she replied, her voice calm but pointed, carrying an edge that hinted at her growing irritation. Michael nodded slowly, but his eyes remained skeptical, darting from her ID to her casual attire. "And is this a personal or business account?" he continued, despite the information being clearly stated on the form in bold letters. Evelyn felt her patience wearing thin, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the counter. "Personal account. Everything is on the form. Is there a problem?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He turned to Mia, whispering something Evelyn couldn't hear, his lips barely moving as if guarding a secret. The young teller nodded nervously, her eyes flicking toward Evelyn before quickly looking away. Michael then turned back with a strained smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We just need to verify some additional information, Mrs. Thompson. Can you tell me your last account balance?" This question hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. She knew this wasn't standard procedure. She had written the policies for this bank herself, and there was no rule requiring customers to recall their last balance for a small transaction like this. Her mind raced. Was this a deliberate attempt to humiliate her, or was it something deeper, something rooted in bias? "I don't remember the exact amount," Evelyn responded, her voice now icy, each word deliberate and measured. "But you have my account number. You can look it up just as you would for any other customer." Michael didn't reply right away. He looked down at the form, then back at Evelyn, his gaze assessing as if trying to gauge whether she would back down under scrutiny. "We take security very seriously," he said, his tone smooth but loaded with implication, as if suggesting she might be a risk. "This is just a precaution." Evelyn felt her blood boil, her heart pounding with a mix of frustration and indignation, a precaution for what she asked. Her voice sharper now, cutting through the tense silence of the lobby. "What exactly are you implying here?" Mr. Reed. Michael didn't answer directly. Instead, he slid another clipboard across the counter, his movements slow and deliberate, almost taunting. "Could you fill out this form again? It's just procedure." Evelyn didn't touch the clipboard. She stood tall, her eyes locked on Michael, her presence commanding despite her unassuming appearance. "I don't believe this," she said, her voice low but powerful, resonating with barely contained anger. "I've provided everything, my ID, my account number, my transaction history. So why am I being treated like a fraud?" The air in the lobby grew stifling, the faint hum of the air conditioning, the only sound breaking the silence. A few other customers began to take notice, whispering among themselves, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. One elderly man in a worn coat glanced over his expression, a mix of sympathy and confusion, while a young woman with a toddler clutched her hand, her eyes wide with concern. Mia stood silently behind Michael, her eyes averted, clearly uncomfortable, her fingers fidgeting with a pen as if wishing to disappear. Michael maintained his calm facade, but Evelyn noticed the tension in how he gripped his own pen, the knuckles whitening slightly. "We don't mean to offend, Mrs. Thompson," he said, though his tone wasn't convincing, carrying a hint of condescension. "We just need to be certain." Certain of what? Evelyn interrupted, her voice no longer restrained, each word laced with a growing fury. "That I have a right to access my own money, or that I deserve to be treated like a human being here." Michael didn't respond. Instead, he signaled to a security guard standing near the entrance to approach. The guard, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Carl, stepped forward, his hand resting near his belt as if ready to act, his stern expression adding a layer of intimidation to the already charged atmosphere. Evelyn's heart raced, not out of fear, but out of anger. She couldn't believe that in her own bank, a place she had poured her heart into, she was being treated like a threat. "Why are you calling security?" Evelyn asked, her voice cold but challenging, her eyes narrowing as she stared down Michael. "Am I causing a disturbance, or do you think I don't belong here?" Carl glanced at Michael, awaiting instructions, his posture rigid, but Michael only said, "We just want to ensure everything goes smoothly." His words rehearsed, lacking any genuine concern. Evelyn let out a humorless laugh, the sound sharp and cutting through the tension. "You're refusing to process my transaction despite my providing all necessary documentation. You're calling security to intimidate me. I want to know the real reason behind all of this. Is it because of how I'm dressed, or is it something else you're not saying?" Michael paled, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead, but he tried to maintain his composure, adjusting his tie nervously. "Mrs. Thompson, if you would just calm down." Evelyn cut him off immediately, her tone like steel. "I am calm, Mr. Reed, but you've decided I don't belong here, and now you'll face the consequences." She turned to Carl, the guard, her gaze piercing. "And you, if you think intimidating a customer is your job, you need to rethink your professional ethics. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't threatened anyone. So why are you standing here like I'm a criminal?" The tension escalated further when Michael, in a final desperate attempt to control the situation, pressed a button under the counter. A silent alarm for additional security. Evelyn knew exactly what this meant. They were trying to paint her as a real threat, even though she had done nothing wrong. Footsteps echoed from behind as two more guards entered the lobby, their expressions stern, their heavy boots thudding ominously on the marble floor. One of them, a burly man with a radio crackling on his shoulder, scanned the room, his hand hovering near a taser on his belt. The other, younger but equally imposing, positioned himself near the door, blocking any easy exit. The lobby felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The customers now openly stared, some whispering in shock, others frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or flee. The young woman with the toddler pulled her child closer, her face pale, while the elderly man shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Evelyn stood firm, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and resolve. She refused to be cowed. "You've made a big mistake," she said, her voice low and dangerous, carrying the weight of years of battling injustice. "A mistake you won't easily fix. You're escalating this situation for no reason, and I guarantee you, it will not end the way you think." Michael's facade began to crack, his hands trembling slightly as he glanced at the growing crowd of onlookers. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Mia, still behind him, looked as if she might cry. Her hands clasped tightly together. Carl shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence wavering under Evelyn's unflinching gaze. The additional guards exchanged uncertain looks, sensing the situation was spiraling beyond a simple misunderstanding. Evelyn took a step closer to the counter, her presence commanding despite the odds stacked against her. "I'm not leaving until my transaction is processed," she declared, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "And if you think I'll stand here and let you treat me like this, you've got another thing coming." The atmosphere in the bank lobby was electric, heavy with anticipation and unease. The other customers were no longer whispering. They were openly watching, some even pulling out their phones to record their murmurs, growing into a low hum of disbelief and curiosity. The young woman with the toddler whispered to her child to stay quiet, her eyes darting between Evelyn and the guards while the elderly man gripped his cane tighter, his expression hardening as if ready to speak out. Evelyn knew she couldn't let this situation drag on. The longer it persisted, the more it risked spiraling into something uglier. She took a deep breath, her eyes still locked on Michael, who now seemed visibly rattled, sweat glistening on his brow despite the cool air of the lobby. With a calm but commanding voice that belied the storm of emotions within her, she spoke. "Mr. Reed, I think it's time I introduce myself properly." She reached into her purse with deliberate slowness, her movements measured to draw every eye in the room. The guards tensed their hands, inching closer to their equipment, but Evelyn ignored them, her focus unwavering. She pulled out an old business card she always carried as a reminder of her journey, a worn piece of cardstock that had seen decades of struggle and triumph. She placed it on the counter with a soft tap, the sound echoing in the tense silence, and slid it toward Michael. On the card, the words "Evelyn Thompson, founder and CEO, Apex Trust," were printed clearly in bold black ink, a stark contrast to the faded edges. Michael looked down at the card, and his face turned ashen, the color draining from his cheeks, as if he'd seen a ghost. His hand froze mid-air, trembling as he processed the words. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His earlier confidence shattered in an instant. Mia, standing behind him, covered her mouth with a gasp, her eyes wide with horror, her body shrinking as if trying to disappear into the background. Carl and the other two guards froze, their stern expressions, faltering uncertainty creeping into their postures as they exchanged quick, nervous glances. "I am Evelyn Thompson," she said, her voice low but resonating through the lobby like a thunderclap, each word carrying the weight of her authority. "I built this bank from the ground up. I signed off on the budget to open this very branch, and I approved the hiring of each of you. Today I walked in here as an ordinary customer, expecting to be treated with the same respect I've instilled in this company's values. But instead, you treated me like a fraud. You made me feel like I didn't belong in the very place I created a place meant to be, a sanctuary of trust for everyone, not a battlefield of prejudice." Silence enveloped the lobby so thick it felt almost tangible. The customers stood transfixed, some with jaws dropped, others nodding slowly as the gravity of her words sank in. The elderly man let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief, while the young woman's eyes softened with a mix of awe and sympathy. Michael finally found his voice, though it trembled pitifully. "Mrs. Thompson, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." His words stumbled over each other, his hands fumbling as he tried to adjust his tie, a futile attempt to regain some semblance of control. But Evelyn raised a hand, signaling him to stop, her gesture firm and unyielding. "Sorry isn't enough," she said, her tone cutting like ice. "This isn't personal, this is systemic. If I, the founder of this bank, can be treated like this, interrogated, humiliated, and threatened with security, what about other customers, those without power or a voice? How are they being treated when no one is watching? How many have walked away from this bank feeling diminished just because of how they look or what they wear?" She turned to the customers, watching, her eyes filled with a fiery determination that seemed to ignite the room. "I promise everyone here, starting today, Apex Trust will not tolerate any form of discrimination. I will personally ensure that every customer, no matter who they are, is treated with the respect they deserve. This bank was built on the principle of fairness, and I will not let that vision be tarnished by ignorance or bias." A few nodded vigorously. Some clapped lightly, their faces reflecting a shared sense of vindication, sensing the sincerity and passion in her words. The elderly man called out softly, "You tell him, ma'am," his voice rough but supportive, earning a few murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Evelyn turned back to Michael, her gaze unwavering, pinning him in place. "Mr. Reed, I'm not firing you immediately, but you will undergo retraining on anti-discrimination practices, and I will closely monitor your performance from now on. I want to see if you can learn from this, if you can change. But know this, one more misstep and there will be no second chance." Michael nodded mutely, his face a mask of shame and fear, unable to meet her eyes. "And you," she turned to Carl, her voice stern but not unkind, "you need to understand that your role is to protect customers, not intimidate them. I wasn't a threat, yet you stood here ready to act against me. Think about that the next time you follow orders without question." Carl shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders slumping as he gave a small, reluctant nod. "And Miss Carter," she looked at Mia, who flinched under the weight of her attention, "you need to learn to listen and respect every customer, regardless of their appearance or attire. You saw my ID. You had my information. Yet you chose to doubt me from the start. That choice reflects a deeper problem, one I expect you to address." Mia's face flushed crimson, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but she nodded quickly, unable to speak, and Ms. Carter, Evelyn, looked at Mia, who flinched under the weight of her attention. "You need to learn to listen and respect every customer regardless of their appearance or attire. You saw my ID. You had my information. Yet you chose to doubt me from the start. That choice reflects a deeper problem, one I expect you to address." Mia's face flushed crimson, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but she nodded quickly, unable to speak. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the counter for support, the reality of her actions sinking in under Evelyn's piercing gaze. Evelyn then addressed the two additional guards who had entered the lobby, their imposing presence now diminished in the face of her authority. "And to the rest of you," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "your job is to ensure safety, not to escalate a situation that never needed to be escalated. I want you to think about the message you send when you surround a customer who has done nothing wrong. If you're unsure, ask questions before acting blind. Obedience to flawed orders helps no one." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, the burly one with the radio lowering his hand from his equipment, while the younger one shifted his weight awkwardly, both nodding in reluctant acknowledgement of her words. She concluded by turning back to Michael, her tone firm but measured, a leader reclaiming control of her domain. "Now I expect my transaction to be processed immediately. No more delays, no more excuses. And I want every person in this room to witness that even in the face of this treatment, I will not be deterred from what is rightfully mine." Michael, still visibly shaken, nodded mutely, his fingers fumbling as he typed into the computer with unsteady hands. The lobby remained silent save for the soft clacking of keys and the occasional murmur from the onlookers. Within less than 2 minutes, he completed the process, sliding the cash across the counter with a receipt, his eyes avoiding Evelyn's as if afraid of what he might see there. Evelyn took the money, counted it deliberately in full view of everyone, then tucked it into her purse with a nod of acknowledgement, but no gratitude. Before leaving, she paused, her hand resting on the counter, her posture straight and unyielding. She scanned the room, taking in the faces of the employees and customers alike, ensuring her final words would linger long after she was gone. "Today isn't the end," she said, her voice resonating with quiet power. "This is the beginning of a major change at Apex Trust. I won't let anyone, not a single soul, go through what I experienced today. I built this bank to be a beacon of trust and equality, and I will fight with everything I have to restore that vision. If any of you, employee or customer, ever feel mistreated here, know that my door is open. I will hear you and I will act." Her words hung in the air, a promise etched into the very walls of the branch. As she turned to leave, the elderly man who had spoken earlier stood up from his seat near the wall, his cane tapping lightly as he approached her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gruff but warm, "I've been coming to this bank for years, and I've seen folks like me get pushed around too many times. What you did here today, it means something." "Thank you," Evelyn offered him a small, genuine smile, the first of the day, and nodded. "Thank you for saying that. It's for people like you that I keep fighting." The young woman with the toddler also gave a shy wave, her child peeking out from behind her leg with curious eyes. As if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Evelyn walked toward the glass doors, her sneakers silent on the marble floor. But before she stepped outside, she turned back one last time, her eyes locked onto Michael, Mia, and the guards, a silent reminder of the accountability they now faced. Then, with a final nod to the customers who had borne witness, she pushed the door open and stepped into the cool Chicago evening, the orange glow of the setting sun casting long shadows behind her. The lobby remained quiet for a moment after her departure, as if processing the magnitude of what had just unfolded before the murmurs of awe and disbelief slowly resumed among the crowd. The day after the incident, Evelyn didn't waste a moment. She convened an emergency meeting with the entire leadership team of Apex Trust at the corporate headquarters, her presence commanding the boardroom with an intensity that left no room for complacency. Flanked by her most trusted advisors, she laid out a comprehensive reform plan, her voice steady and resolute as she detailed each step. All employees, from tellers to senior managers, were to undergo mandatory anti-discrimination training with sessions led by experts in diversity and inclusion. An anonymous hotline was established accessible to both customers and staff to report any unfair treatment or bias without fear of retaliation. Additionally, she formed an internal audit team, a group of undercover evaluators who would regularly pose as customers to assess service quality at branches across the country, ensuring no corner of her empire remained unchecked. Michael Reed, Mia Carter, and Carl were required to submit detailed written reports explaining their behavior during the incident, a task Evelyn insisted on to force them to confront their actions head-on. They were also enrolled in the first wave of special training sessions, focusing not just on policy, but on empathy and cultural sensitivity. Evelyn didn't fire them immediately, a decision that surprised some of her advisors. She believed true change came from education and improvement, not punishment for punishment's sake. However, she made it abundantly clear in a private meeting with each of them that any similar behavior in the future would result in immediate termination. "I'm giving you a chance to prove you can be better," she told Michael, her gaze unflinching. "Don't make me regret it." Under Evelyn's relentless leadership, Apex Trust began to transform at a pace few had anticipated. Within months, customers noticed the difference. Tellers greeted them with genuine warmth. Managers took complaints seriously, and there were no more judgmental looks or unnecessary interrogations. Complaints about discriminatory behavior dropped by over 60% in the first quarter, following the reforms, and the bank's reputation, once tarnished by sporadic reports of bias, began to shine as a model of inclusivity. Evelyn also took her story public, delivering a keynote speech at a national financial conference where she recounted her experience with raw honesty. Her words, broadcast live to thousands, inspired other companies to reevaluate their own practices, sparking a broader conversation about systemic bias in corporate America. Beyond the corporate changes, Evelyn made a personal commitment to stay connected to the ground level of her business. She began making unannounced visits to various branches, sometimes as herself and sometimes in disguise, to ensure the culture she envisioned was taking root. During one such visit to a branch in Detroit, she encountered a young single mother struggling with a loan application due to a clerical error. Evelyn sat with her for over an hour, guiding her through the process and ensuring the error was corrected on the spot. Word of such action spread, turning her into a figure of not just authority, but genuine care within the communities Apex Trust served. Evelyn Thompson's story is a powerful reminder that real power doesn't lie in punishment, but in transformative change. As a leader, you have the responsibility not only to build a successful company, but also to ensure it reflects the values you hold dear. Discrimination, no matter how subtle or seemingly insignificant, can inflict deep wounds, eroding trust and dignity. Only by confronting it head-on, as Evelyn did, can we create environments that are truly fair and inclusive. She chose to stand up not for revenge, but to protect those without a voice, turning a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for systemic reform. Her actions challenge us to ask ourselves, what would we do in the face of injustice? The next time you witness bias or unfair treatment, whether in a bank, a workplace, or your own community, will you speak up? Will you demand better, not just for yourself, but for everyone who might follow in your footsteps? Evelyn's legacy teaches us that change starts with a single voice, and that voice can be yours. Thank you for joining us in the inspiring story of Evelyn Thompson today. If you found this video meaningful and want to hear more stories about fairness, courage, or profound life lessons, don't forget to hit the like button to support us and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new content. Let's spread these positive values together. We can't wait to see you in the next video.